football coaching and analysis right here in Australia. GIS is the largest provider of sports degrees in the UK, with campuses at Wembley and Etihad Stadium. Learn online with unique access to the iconic MCG and a big-hitting Australian industry network. Be one of the first Australians to get a football master's degree and join GIS's global network of football leaders. Apply now to start in February 2023. Learn more at gis.sport/FNR. That's gis.sport/FNR.
You're listening to the State of Our Football Nation on FNR. And each and every week, let me try again. Each and every week, I can say with great confidence, there are companies, supporters, and people who get behind FNR Football Nation Radio, and one of them is the Global Institute of Sport. Again, giving people an opportunity who love the game, who want to be involved in the game, a chance for a career in the game. Pokuah Frimpong is my co-host. Welcome to everyone who joins us each and every week on this program called State of Our Football Nation. A couple of very special guests to tell you about in just a moment. In fact, I think we should introduce the first one. Now, we won't hold it against him, but he was born in Glasgow a number of years ago. I'm not going to mention how many number of years ago, but he's spent a lifetime in the game. He's spent a lifetime coaching. He's spent a lifetime playing. Is there anything he hasn't done? And Pokuah, I can tell you now, he joins us because Football Federation Australia, or Football Australia as it is today, has appointed him to step up and take up a very important position in the game, just as we get ever closer to the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand come July. Welcome to Tom Sermanni. Tom, welcome.
Football Coaches Association.
Sorry, we'll try that again. We missed you at the beginning. Say it again. Hello, Tom. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, George. It's great to be here.
Now, what have they given you to pursue? I knew Ernie Merrick had a particular role and a particular responsibility, but he seems to have moved on to an even stronger position within Football Australia. And apparently he's anointed you, or they've anointed you to come in and basically take over that part of the competition and that part of the game.
Oh, I don't think. Hopefully, they're not annoyed. It's the Football Coaches Association who have appointed me as an ambassador to take over from Ernie because of the role he's taken up in
with Football Australia.
Football Australia, the role that he's taken up, it makes it impossible for him to do the role at the Football Coaches Association. So, Ron Smith did it initially. And then he had other roles, and then Ernie took over. And now, I say they're getting a youth policy in now. I'm taking over from those two.
You've mentioned two of the biggest names in the game for an awful long time in terms of coaching. Ron Smith, an ornament and a terrific man who knows the game and still, contributes. Ernie, who just will not quit. As long as he has his fabulous bottle of red wine, and I'm talking quality, he will stay with us forever and a day. Do you have a particular strong ingredient that you add to your daily mix to keep you vital and to keep you hungry and wanting to be part of the game?
I always have an afternoon sleep. That's as much as I can, which seems to be getting longer. Well, I was trying to make it longer and longer these days, but I'm ending up being too busy to fit it in. And I'd be quite happy to join Ernie in his expensive bottle of wine, but I didn't know he forked out that kind of money.
Oh, no. You see, when you spend the time in the game that he has, you get a chance to meet and to mix with a great number of wonderful people. And some of them, of course, are winemakers. And I'm sure that he has a very special connection to some brands that I don't know. And Pokuah, of course, who's a fitness fanatic, just keeps that stuff well away from her body. I've got to tell you, Pokuah, you should be rather pleased that we've got Tom Sermanni on.
Absolutely.
Because he's coached just about everybody. He's coached the New Zealand women's team. He's coached the Australian team. Any questions you might to run past him?
I was just
waiting your turn?
No, I was waiting my turn, but I was also browsing the Wikipedia page.
No. You ask Tom and he'll answer everything.
No, but see, I was looking and I was like, Tom's his pages. The pages are bigger than any biggest book in the entire world.
It's called a CV, and it's a quite substantial one. Yeah, can you believe some of the things he's done?
No, I was going to ask you, Tom. Obviously, with the Women's World Cup coming, and obviously you've had a role to play in both of the host nations, their women's football departments. How do you think this World Cup is going to go with those with Australia and New Zealand operating it, and in terms of their football, which side's the better side? Whose side's going to take it?
He's not going to answer that question.
Come on, Tom.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I need to say I'm actually back working with Canada at this World Cup, and as part of
He's working with the enemy, George.
He's not working with the enemy. He's helping them through a difficult phase, and their men's game is prospering. Their women's team in the Olympics was awesome.
Yeah, and it's in a part-time technical role, not the head coach or anything. Anyway, but I think the World Cup will be fantastic. I think you're already seeing the ticket sales going through the roof. Yep. The fact that they moved the first game to the Olympic Stadium now,
yes,
unbelievable statement. And how as I say, I think people outside the game don't realise how big this game is. And the fact that you've got a world event in a women's sport that you can actually put 32 teams together. Outside of our football, there's not another world sport, men's or women's, that could actually put 32 teams together and run a competitive tournament. So I think it's going to be phenomenal.
Tommy, you're across and have seen the talent that's available to New Zealand. You've seen the talent available to Australia, and of course you're watching and covering many of the other teams. And as you touched on, Canada, is the arrival of all those European leagues and of course the Super League in Britain, which allows many of our players, Australian and New Zealanders, to now actually have a long season and not just 10 games as we saw in the early days of the A-League women's. This allows them to become infinitely better players because they become more seasoned. They get a chance to play in a particular set and sequence with other players of world renown. Do you think that's one of the things why we're seeing such great progress being made in the game for women?
Yeah, the European juggernaut has eventually awakened, and it happened about probably 3 or 4 years ago, really, where they actually started saying, this part of the game is one that can be serious and that we can actually grow and we can actually benefit out of as clubs, as nations. And I think we're seeing that effect now, and the impact it's had on women's football has been unbelievable. And the great thing now is that, there are not just the top tier players, but you can, you look at I don't want to call them necessarily second tier players, but not the star players, are now able to make a professional living out of the game for their whole careers. So the game's changed significantly, and it's had a big impact at international level. So going into this World Cup now, you could probably pick one of 8 teams that could actually win it.
Wow.
And in any tournament, as I say, in any sport, anywhere in the world, to actually look and say, there's 8 teams in with a chance, or even more, is just phenomenal. So the game's gone to an incredible level over the last, very, very quickly, since about 2018, 2019.
We're talking to Tom Sermanni, our special guest on State of Our Football Nation on FNR, George Danikian along with Pokuah Frimpong, and something that really I need to ask. You've been in tournament play. You understand the dynamics, and you understand how it differs from, say, a competition that runs 20 or 30 weeks, right?
Yeah.
What are the key ingredients that both New Zealand and Australia have to take on board to make sure that their contribution is going to be as good as it can be? And we know that luck plays a role as well.
I think the two things, one is not to go in overdone, and the other one is not to get too distracted. I think the biggest challenge for Australia and to an extent New Zealand, with them having a home World Cup and with the profile of the Matildas, there's going to be so much going on, so much noise outside the group. It's going to be very important for them not to get distracted with that noise. You know, every man and his dog, TV station, radio station, will want to be talking to Sam Kerr, want to talk to Caitlin Ford, etc. So it's important to do that. And it's also important to get that last bit of preparation right, where you don't want to have your team together for too long going into the tournament, but you don't want to have them too short, so that they get into the tournament fresh. And that can be, you know, particularly around the FIFA rules and around the amount of games players are playing now, that can be a little bit of a tricky challenge.
Speaking of, you don't have your players together for too long, and you want to keep the side fresh. I think a lot of people have wondered in terms of the Tony Gustafsson side. He said a while ago that he's figured out what his squad is heading into this World Cup, and there are maybe one or two tweaks that may occur, but he's relatively solidified his squad. As a head coach, how long out before a World Cup do you know what your team is? How long do you reckon is probably a good time?
It depends where your squad's at. You know, if I go back to...
In terms of development, is that right?
Okay. Yeah, if I go back to the last two World Cups I had with Australia, 2007, 2011, our 2007 squad was really a settled, experienced squad. So I knew that squad some time out. But there's always the last three players are always your biggest challenge. But that squad was fairly settled. 2011, we had lots of retirements. So we were actually going into that we ended up going in with 8 players under 20. So that was a more challenging squad to put together, because you weren't quite sure where the players were at in their stage of development. And that was much more challenging. So the ideal is to have, and I think the Matildas have been fairly settled over the last few years. They're not an old squad, but they're a very experienced squad. So the real core of players, I think, already picked themselves. And then I think there's probably 3 or 4 at the bottom where you're juggling 6 or 7 players for those last 3 or 4 spots. And I think that's where the position that he's in. And I think that even goes towards the starting 11. I would say now Tony would probably have 9 of his starting 11 kind of at the back of his head. And to be honest, that's a good place to be. That's a good place to be at this stage.
Tom Sermanni, sports science plays its role, and it continues to make a bigger impact each and every year. We talked about the cycle, and you had 2 different sides there in different cycles. One was, as you said, pretty complete, and the other one was brand new, experimental side. How many internationals do you think players need, from the coach's perspective, to know that they're not going to let you down? Is it 20 games? Is it 15 games? Or is it dependent entirely on the characters that you bring in?
It depends, again, on the cohesion of the squad. Sometimes, if I go back to those 2 World Cups that I had, in my first World Cup with the experienced squad, what we wanted to do was play games because we had the team. I wasn't sort of putting the team together. The second time, what we did was we had the landscape was different then. What we did was had lots of camps where we got the players working together to see which ones came through. The challenge you have when you only play games is that you don't get much time to do training and actually look at players in depth. So it's trying to get that balance right. In saying that, the game now has changed significantly, where it's like the men's game. You're only getting your players in FIFA windows. And in most of the FIFA windows, you've really got to use those windows to play games. And that's part of that is a financial reason, but part of it is also you actually don't end up getting that many games together. So at the moment, really, when you come into camp, it's about preparation and about games and about refining your squad to hopefully get it ready to hit the ground running come July.
And obviously, when you were the coach of the Matildas, the build-up of the players was entirely different. A lot of them were homegrown talent, were playing at home in the A-League Women's at the time. But now a lot of the players are playing abroad, playing in Europe, and there are some that play at home in Australia, and we see them week in and week out. But what do you think is the role of the competition of the A-League Women's? Because for me, when I look at it, I don't know if the time has passed, but I do think women's football is at a different landscape to men's football, where the A-League Women's could grow to be one of the most competitive women's competitions in the world. We just play it at different time, and it makes it a little bit difficult. But how do you see the A-League Women's in the landscape of women's football?
That's a great question, because I think the landscape's changed. When we started the league in 2008, it was a league that we wanted to have a domestic profile. It was a league where we wanted to extend the year for players. It was a league where we wanted to look at players who are probably late developers. It's now become a normal competitive league. But over the last 2 or 3 years, obviously, because of where leagues have expanded in the world, we've lost some of our key players and most of our Matildas. So in some ways, it's sort of gone back a little bit to a developmental league where it's a very young league, and you're looking at domestic players. So at the moment, I think that's where it is in the landscape, which is not a bad thing, because what it's allowing is it's allowing a lot of young players to play all the way during the summer where they wouldn't normally play. And if we can extend it to next year, 22 games, where they're playing a reasonable number of games, they're training for 35 weeks, and there's a professional environment that you can get here. So it's going to help that development. And then the reality of where the women's game is at the moment, from there, the better players, like in men's football, are going to head overseas. Then I think in time, as your older Matildas start to sort of maybe finish their careers overseas, hopefully they'll start filtering back. So say maybe like the Claire Polkinghorns, Kellogg Knights playing in the league this year, maybe a Lydia Williams, who are, getting up to the mid-30s. Hopefully when they're sort of finished their time in Europe, they'll then start coming back to the league. So we'll start getting that mix of really good, experienced professionals coming back and the young players coming through who will then take their careers in different directions.
The top 4 nations in the world, in your opinion at the moment, Canada has got to be right up there. The Americans have got to be right up there. The Lionesses, what did you make of England in the Euros?
Sensational. Oh. That's where, when you talked about tournament football, it all just clicked perfectly. And sometimes, obviously it's good management, but sometimes, as you know, George, there's a wee bit of good fortune goes into football. And they just got it right. And everybody contributed. They had a team that was on for 60 minutes, and then they had 3 automatic subs that came on and scored goals every time they came on. So
your impact players.
You don't really have to think. When things aren't going right, you're overthinking things and trying different things. Basically, they had it just kind of clicked and it went like magic. And I think it was a great thing. I'm Scottish. I shouldn't be saying this. I won't be allowed back.
I didn't hear it.
It's a great thing. Heresy. It was a great thing for the game that they won it, because it gave the game in the UK such a boost. And I think that benefits everybody.
It certainly did. And I don't want to bring up sad memories for Tom, because obviously the Scots just narrowly missed out on qualifying for the World Cup after losing to the Irish. I can't remember if it's the Republic of Ireland or Ireland, not quite sure. So Katie McCade's side.
Yeah.
But that Euros moment was a moment that so many people have been waiting for, because the moment it broke in the UK and it was no longer just a niche crowd who love women's football and would tune in for it, and the work of people like Ian Wright and things like that to spread that message really, really important. But once it broke in the UK, it was like it filtered to the general public. Yeah,
but it was like a wave.
Yeah, it was an incredible wave. And I am really looking forward to this Women's World Cup, because there are so many players and so many teams that are capable of winning. As Tom said, there are 8 squads that could win it given their day. And obviously it's a little unfortunate some players some really, really quality players like Beth Mead, Viviana Miedema, Kototo from PSG unable to play in the tournament because of ACL injuries. But the players that are still available, it's absolutely tremendous. So I want to ask, Tom, who's a player that you love watching and you love their game style, just that you're like, wow, that's their level and skill and their dedication is like 10 out of 10.
Well, the player that I'd buy, you just mentioned that, the player that I thought was the best striker in the world, apart from Sam Kerr, obviously, is Miedema. She's the player. She actually reminds me of a female Mark Viduka. She doesn't have the physique of Viduka,
no,
but she's the foot skills. And the
way she plays with her back to the goals, correct?
Back to goal, yeah. The way she plays in the penalty area where, most people become a little bit frantic and she is just such a high quality footballer. So if I was looking at a young player and looking as a centre forward, I would say, you look at her. And that's the player that you look at.
See, Tom, you're speaking my language. Speaking my language. As an Arsenal fan, you're speaking my language. I forgot
to say for Arsenal. George.
It's all right. It's her Ghanaian that's coming through as well.
I have a little question. When I watch Viviana Miedema play, I think she's a number 10. Much like Harry Kane is a number 10 now, I think she's a really great goal scorer, but she's looks like a number 10 to me. Tom, am I crazy to think that she's a number 10?
No, I think she can be either. I think she's got the football ability to be either, like you say, Lynn George mentioned, she can play with a back to goal. She can play penalty area. She can lead the line. She can make runs in behind. But at the same time, she's got that composure and skill and vision that she can play as a number 10 and create chances.
I say to people whenever they say to me, they're a 9 or a 10, but hang on, what system is the team playing?
That is true.
And quite often Conte has asked of Harry to do things that most strikers can't do. And the measure of this young man, and he's still, in my opinion, as a young man, is his development has been extraordinary. And he has added strings to his bow, which tells me he's a fantastic professional. Because, Tom, you want your professionals to aspire each and every season to work on what their weaknesses were and get better. Isn't that right? Yeah. Isn't that what you want from all your players? Yeah, completely. And the other thing on that, and aside to that, is a ban talking in numbers at training. I talk about positions and players. I don't talk numbers. So I think, that's 100%. And I think Harry Kane's probably a great example because of, he's such an accomplished player. But as you say, he's now playing different roles in the team. And what a remarkable consistency. This is the young man that was going to be a one-season wonder, remember?
I wish so badly it was the case.
I remember the season he never scored till October, I think, and people were writing him off.
That's right. And how did he finish?
Finished pretty well.
30 goals or whatever.
I wanted to ask, obviously you started the season with the Western Sydney Wanderers, and you guys brought in Kat Smith as the head coach of the women's team, and it started off rocky against that first game against Newcastle. Was really, really a difficult game, but Kat seems to have turned it around, and they've beaten the three Melbourne sides. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, they've beaten.
Yeah, West Sydney.
I was trying to remember if it was one draw, but beaten all the Melbourne sides, and Kat has the side's major issue in the past has been the lack of scoring, and she really seems to have turned that, and they've kind of almost clicked. How have you seen the development of the Wanderers women's side?
Firstly, I'd say Kat has done a magnificent job here because, like you say, we've literally put it was almost a new team together. I think in that first game against Newcastle, there was only one player in the starting 11 that was at the club last year. So it's not easy when you come in as a new coach and you're putting a whole new group together. And we had a couple of things that just didn't quite go our way early on. And she's done a great job in two particular areas. One, the way she's kept the squad together, because it's quite easy, as you know, when you're not winning games, for a bit of disharmony and things to creep in. She's done a fabulous job keeping the team really united. But she's also made some critical tactical changes that have helped how the team have played. And that's not easy to do, and take that risk, if you like, or back yourself to make those changes. And she's done that, and the team sort of turned the corner and had some really positive results. So she's despite the fact she comes from Victoria, she's done very well.
Tom, it sounds like she's a great people person, but it also suggests to me that she's a great football brain, because you can't make those adjustments and pick up little things here and there, unless you're thinking about the game in a forward fashion, like looking forward, like playing chess. You're playing 50 moves ahead. The elite are playing 100 moves ahead in some respects. It shows that she has it inside her, that DNA, that to be a very good people person and manager.
Yeah, 100%. In both those areas, are critical to coaching. It's not just about your technical and football ability, and it's not just about your ability to manage players. It's a balance of both. And she's done that exceptionally well. And particularly as a young coach who brought up in a coaching system where it was kind of regimented that you played a 4-3-3 in some capacity, and she's gone about and completely changed that, and that shows both insight and courage and confidence in your ability to be able to do those things.
Yeah, they're the sorts of ingredients that every man manager or person manager must have. They must have the courage. They must have that ability to stand away from it in the heat of the battle. You hear people saying, the really good ones never lose their heads. While the others are losing their heads, they're sitting there looking around, making those minute adjustments in milliseconds. We're not talking about 5 minutes. We're talking milliseconds in the penalty area. But they see it's like that goal that we saw at Brighton against Liverpool the other day. That young man from Japan did something that if I told you I was going to do it, you would not believe it was possible. And if someone said it, wrote it down in a script for a Hollywood movie, you'd go, no, kid, it doesn't happen. No one's going to buy it. And he took it beautifully. He brought the ball into control. He then balked almost. He almost balked and then pushed it past for a goal. That's exceptional. And we're seeing more and more of that. Is the exposure around the world and all the leagues now that we're seeing from every level, this was never available in my day. If I got something in black and white, 10 minutes from Britain, and when I got to SBS, we had the opportunity, of course, to get tapes from around the world. But to understand now that the young men and women can see anything almost on demand, it's incredible. Is that why we're seeing so much adventure on the pitch?
I think that certainly helped. Yeah, I think the ability to see things, particularly for young players and young people, because that's what they do. They copy. And even, back, I say our day, I'm a bit older than you, George. Back in the day.
Actually, I'm older than you, young fella.
Are you? Well,
I've got you covered. I've got you covered. My wife would sit there and say, give it a break. But I've got him. But you were about to say.
I think the exposure now that young people can see things and they're great copiers, young people, and they can go out. Back in our day, there wasn't that much you could see.
No.
So it was much harder to copy things. Now they can actually go out and they can do that, and facilities are better.
And they can record themselves, can't they? They can actually record themselves trying it.
All that stuff, yeah.
We're going to talk to Nick Montgomery very shortly. He's doing a fabulous job at the Central Coast Mariners.
Really?
And he's a terrific young man. And he's said to us on a number of occasions, he's got some terrific young talent there. And his trick, not his trick, but his requirement and his composure is trying to make sure that he gives them the time to get the experience, but not to overplay their hand, not to ask too much of them. He doesn't want to burn them out. He doesn't want to ask too much. He wants them each and every time he calls them to step in to make an impact. Is that the ideal way to make younger players better players? Give them the opportunity to be impact players, like we saw with young Garang Kuol, who was extraordinary even at the World Cup.
Yeah, no, very much so. I think if you have the opportunity to do that and the environment to do that, it's perfect. And they also then need, again, those managerial skills to give those young players the confidence and the enough rope to be able to go out and actually do those things. And also to practice. I think one of the things that I found that we've been in a sort of systemized, structural coach education system for some time, and I think that's really that's really pulled players back a little bit. I think we need to go back to more individual work. I think we've become, one of the downsides of all the stuff we've done is that everything has become too organized, too structured, too sterile, if you like. And I think it's important to go back to more, developing of the individual player and the individual, and then balance that within the team structure. And I think we're beginning now to see that come back again. And I think that's a great thing. And I think, and this is not, I don't have any evidence of this, but I think, if you look at the A-League now, you're seeing a lot of young African players come into the A-League. And they've got that natural ability just to play the game, because that's how they've been brought up. And I think that's a breath of fresh air. And if we can see a bit more of that coming into the game within the structure, then I think that would be great for the game and individual development.
Bruce Kamau was one of the first of those young players, like a breath of fresh air. He scored a memorable goal for the Adelaide Reds in a grand final back in 2016 at the Adelaide Oval, and lit a fuse for the next generation of youngsters. And Garang Kuol is that latest one. And what he's doing in Scotland in these early formative moments is exciting. But what he did for us in the World Cup, and Pokuah and I have spoken a number of occasions, that passage of play where he brought the ball down in the dying minutes of the game against Argentina and hit the target, and if it hadn't been for the brilliance of the Argentinian keeper, we would have been 2-2.
Yeah, I know.
How exciting would that have been?
Yeah, no.
Oh. But 10 years ago, they wouldn't have tried that. That's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Bravo. Tom, listen, we're so excited that you chose to join us today. Thank you very much. Please don't be a stranger. We'd love to continue, and as the competition, of course, for the Women's World Cup gets closer and closer, we'd love to get you back on air on FNR and talk some more. Is that possible?
That would be lovely. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Great to catch up.
Tom Sermanni, thank you so very much for joining us. He's been just terrific. Although, as we touched on at the very beginning, he was born in Glasgow, Pokuah. We've never held it against him.
We haven't.
The Scots have contributed to this game in this country on a great many occasions.
Don't let Lockie know that too loud.
Hey, has Lockie stopped breathing?
No,
or has he held his breath?
Lockie will be in the FNR studios. He'll be on Radio Dub tonight with me.
Is that right?
He'll be here.
Oh, well, please ask him to take a deep breath, because I noticed that there was a moment there. There was an absolute moment when young Garang Kuol burst onto the scene, and I was concerned that maybe, just maybe, Lockie would have stopped breathing. But we've got Tom Sermanni on one side, and Nick Montgomery joins us. Welcome, young fella.
Hey guys, how are you?
Good. Tom has been raving and talking about your work. He's a very big fan. You must be chuffed to hear that sort of talk from someone who's contributed to the game on so many different levels for such a long time.
Nick doesn't know who I am.
Oh, he does. He knows. He knows. He knows. What do you make of that, Nick?
Obviously, it's really humbling when you hear people talk nicely about yourself, but I think most importantly about the club, and obviously the club has had a big history in the A-League since it started, and it's had ups and downs. But I think now, we've sort of really gone back to what the club's about, and that's developing players. That's giving a platform for local talent, Australian talent, as well as, visa players that are coming here for the right reasons, not for the salary, but to help their career and help them maybe use this as a stepping stone. So that's always nice. So I appreciate the nice words, Tom. I don't know what you said. Hopefully it was nice. But
well, you'll hear it. You'll hear it in the podcast. You'll certainly hear it whenever you reach onto FNR. But in truth, one of the things that Tom mentioned, and we can talk about it again, he's been delighted with how we're going away from some of the organised and very systematic coaching, and we're giving breath to these young talented players coming through now and letting them grow and mature at their level and not trying to squeeze them in to make them more like soldiers. We're letting them show us what's in their DNA, but also what flair they have. And you've done it magnificently, Nick, especially this year. You've done it the last couple of years, but this year you're letting some of these boys fly, which is super exciting. And that's what Tom was alluding to. He was saying we need more of it, and he's delighted to see it happening.
I think the national team needs more of it. If there's ever a time now after the World Cup, I think you look at some of the big countries that never made it to the World Cup, and when the Socceroos don't only make it, but they get through to to the knockout stages. And we have a player like George and Pokuah, who 2 years ago was playing in Melbourne at an NPL club, and then he becomes the second youngest to Pele to ever play in a knockout stage. So, and then he gets moved to Newcastle United in the Premier League. So the momentum from the World Cup and a lot of good young players. Kai Rolls was absolutely outstanding in the tournament. Harry Sutar, some young boys that came on. Bacchus, and you look at Bacchus, for example, good midfielder, playing at West Sydney the year before, not even making the top six. But again, that's not always a reflection of the young players. There's good young players out there. Fortunately, that we've got a lot of them at the Mariners, and look, it's. I think the country has shown that it cannot not only produce good A-League players, it can produce players that can play at the top level, international and overseas. And you look at the Scottish Premier League now, it's littered with young Australian talent because it's a league where they can easily get there. They don't need an English passport, and they get opportunities. So it's I'm proud that I can say that I've maybe contributed a little bit to developing some of these young players.
I can say without any problem that the sheer fact that you've given them a license to thrill is fantastic. The scenes on the final day of Garang Kuol's A-League career were most memorable, and you got a great result. Has that feedback filtered throughout the district and throughout the club?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously, we're all really proud of Garang, and obviously he's now overseas at a Premier League club on loan in the SPL. But for him, it's also a continued learning process where we told him it's going to be a lot harder. It's a lot more ruthless. There's a lot more games. It's more physical. There's more pressure. So he's going to take time to adapt because he's such a young kid. But yeah, I think to see that. That exposure for Garang, and to see not only here but just global recognition, because you're talking about a kid that had people from Barcelona talking about him, and teams all over the world were looking at him. But now for Garang comes the hardest time, and that's for him to keep his feet on the ground, to mix in the right circles, to keep level-headed and to keep humble, because if he doesn't do that, there's plenty of examples you can use where that doesn't quite work out. So, that's what we need to make sure doesn't happen. And, the national team here, keeps bringing him into national teams and exposing him with the best Australian players as well, and keeps helping to mentor him. So, yeah, it's been a good time, but he's now moved on, and now we're looking at the next young players that can come through into the first team.
Let's talk about the Mariners, Central Coast Mariners. Tom Sermanni is with us and has done a terrific job giving us a sense of some of the excitement that lies ahead with the arrival of the Women's World Cup, and we're going to see an absolute cavalcade of talent. The A-League men's is getting to that interesting stage right now, and you're right on the edge. You're pushing the top team in the competition, the Melbourne City, and you've got some very important games coming up. How does the squad look? Are you carrying any major injuries? And again, don't give away any secrets if you don't have to. But I'm seeing some terrific development play. You're getting some wonderful drive out of the middle, and you've got some people at the top end, as Tom said, who can keep their heads in the penalty area, and they'll get the results. You're seeing goals coming in.
Yeah, look, the statistics are there. Where they've scored the most goals in the league, we create the most opportunities, and again, that's a result of the way that we play. I think we go out and try and win every game, and considering that we are the lowest budget in the league, to have players in that attacking third like Jason Cummins, Tullio, Sammy Silvera, Benny Nicololo, who just brought in Dylan Wenzel-Halls, who's a fantastic young player as well. He's going to add more weight. We've got Michael Roos. We've also got Maresh coming back from a long-term injury. So we know as a team that we're going to create chances. We have goal scorers. And if we can defend properly and not give sloppy goals away like we did against West Sydney a few nights ago, then we can win every game of football. But that's the hardest thing in football. We don't take that for granted. Look, we're not going to change the way that we play. It's come to that time of the season where there's, I think Benny Nicololo was suspended on the weekend for 4 yellow cards because he got a yellow card from the Melbourne City game where he wasn't even involved in a tackle. It was 2 Melbourne City players tackled each other and Benny got a yellow card. So,
ouch.
Crazy things like that. And people pick up niggles.
Tom knows about those things. He's probably seen some of them.
Yeah, amazing. Honestly, you're probably only playing world football to get suspended for 4 yellow cards. But anyway, these are the things that we have to get on with.
Nick, I've got to tell you, Tom can actually tell you of a famous EPL referee who gave, was it 3 yellow cards to one Croatian player, Tom?
Yeah, to Joe Simonic.
Yeah, young Simonic, who, of course, learned much of his football at the Institute of Sport in Canberra. And he got not 1, not 2, but 3 yellow cards, Nick.
Maybe new FIFA
and stayed on.
Look, it's amazing when you have VAR now and you talk clear and obvious errors.
Oh.
And after the game, we made it very clear that he never touched anybody, but apparently there's a process that takes 2 weeks to go through, and by the time that happened, anyway, he's suspended. So that's a long story, but
wow.
It's that time of year where every team's picking up niggles, suspensions, and that's where the squad really comes into test, and that's where here we've got plenty of young players waiting in the wings that know that if they get the opportunity, they can grab it with both hands. So yeah, we take it each game as it comes, the old saying, and yeah, we've got every game from now to the end of the season. It's a tough game because the league's pretty tight. Everyone's fighting for points. There's some big teams down there at the bottom, and everybody's trying to get points. So we can only concentrate on ourselves, and that's what we continue to do.
And Nick, obviously your side's in second position on the table, really close to potentially taking that number 1 spot, but you're in a great position heading into the finals. How do you keep your squad's feet on the ground when they're doing so well this season and there's so much buzz around the squad? How do you as a head coach manage that kind of situation in the squad with the squad?
I think it's got to be realistic and been realistic. We know that we've thrown away points this year. We've also had some 8 VAR goals ruled out, which would have got us more points. So if you add some of them points together, we know we could be quite easily, above Melbourne City, and that's, I don't say that being arrogant, I say that the points that we've actually thrown away and had taken away from us. But Melbourne City are a good team. They're a good team. They've got a massive budget. They've got some very good players. And just try to say to the boys, don't take the pressure off. There's no pressure on us. Nobody expected us to even be in the top 6 last year and this year. So you got nothing to fear. Nothing to fear. Home or away, let's go out and try and win the game. And where we end up at the end of the season is ultimately where we deserve to be. And I always say the Mariners making the top 6 is a massive overachievement. So the fact that we're even been talked about of challenging Melbourne City, that's something that we can be proud of. But we don't take it for granted. And yeah, we just keep driving training every day and keep trying to strengthen the squad. We're bringing in players like Dylan Wenzel-Halls in, and there may be 1 or 2 more coming in this window as well, because we're probably legally under the cap. We've got to spend money, so it's probably a problem that most clubs don't have. But I always say that I'm never going to bring players in from other clubs if they're not better than what we've got at the club and coming through the academy. So we've given plenty of academy boys straight onto A-League contracts, like Jacob Farrell, young Netra Tranis came straight in onto an A-League contract. And yeah, I think it's, unless there's somebody better out there, than what we've got, then I don't believe we should bring them in. And that's why we promote our own players here, which helps us recruit in the academy moving forward.
Tom Sermanni has been listening to you talking, Nick, and I can tell you that for sure that there were a great number of goals that were scored under Tom Sermanni's watch, and he would have loved to have had VAR around. Wouldn't you, Tom?
Sometimes. No, sometimes, but not always.
What advice would you have for Nick, who is one of the most exciting young managers, coaches in the game? I mean, we talk about the January transfer window. My great fear is that Patrick Kesnorbo was picked up by the City Group to take him to Troyes in France. I'm worried now that someone's going to come along and say, hey, this young man down under is doing a fantastic job. Why don't we give him this responsibility? What advice would you have for him, Tom?
No, I think that's the aim. You've got a young coach like Nick. He's good. He's been an outstanding player and now an outstanding coach. So I don't know if advice from me is kind of warranted, but I think what he's done is, and this is what I really admire, is that he's gone into a club that's been, as you say, the least budget in the league,
yep,
where there's not high expectations, and he's driven those expectations. He's outperformed way above what anybody else would have expected, not just in results, but in performances as well, and in developing players. So I think, what Nick's done is really build a fantastic foundation for the future of his coaching career. And I think it's a great way for coaches to start going into that environment. And obviously, just from the way he's talking, he's given his players great confidence to go out there and play and believe in themselves, and not just go out to try and get a result, but go out to actually win games.
There you go.
Now, Nick, I just want to touch on that point a little bit. When you step into the role of Central Coast Mariners coach, and you see all the challenges compared to the rest of the competition in terms of budget, in terms of facilities and things like that, what's the number one priority, like, to set a good culture and foundation to set you on a path that you guys are on currently of winning games and being really competitive in football matches?
So what comes first is what Pokuah is saying. What comes first, Nick?
Look, I truly believe is having good people around. I think having good staff. Firstly, you need staff that are buying into what you want to do. And when you talk about resources, I mentioned this before, but when I took over the academy, luckily I knew people that respected me, and we set up a scouting network, at no cost, with good contacts that I had. My assistant Sergio had around Australia. So that was number one. I also then developed staff from within the club, young staff at the club, instead of outsourcing them. And for example, the video guy now in the A-League space is a young Central Coast boy. He's a fan of the club, a guy called Liam Chauncey. I brought him in. I bought him a camera. He started filming the NPL games, and 3 years later, he's at the cup final in Melbourne, fantastic, filming the first team as the analyst. So there's stuff like that I think is really important, and to have good people around you is number one. I think that is number one. And again, to bring good people in at the club as players that understand the culture, and to remove players and staff that were here that were wrong for the culture. And I had to do that as well. I had to make big decisions without naming names. I had to remove people that weren't right for the club and didn't have the club best interests at heart. And I think when having a group of people and players that are all buying into what you're doing and understand the club and the culture, that's got to be number one. And then you can develop that, and then you can add to that and keep growing that. But yeah, you have to have everybody buying in to what you want to do. And I think that's number one. When I came into the club, that was the most important thing. And
you had the backing of Richard Peel, didn't you? Understanding that he knew what you were saying, and you understood what he wanted. Yeah, look, Richard came in, again, great guy, full of enthusiasm. Where he wanted to invest was his expertise, and that was player development. And that was with some ice baths and saunas, which we never had. So recovery is massively important. We used to get, even my playing days, that carried on until I started coaching, getting in a bin with cold water and icing, and things have improved since then. So really, it's I don't think Tom Sermanni ever saw an ice bin. Tom, did you ever see an ice bin?
Oh, Tom, I think you got yourself on mute.
With beers in it. With beers in it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Got some bins, but we never had ice in it. Or there was ice in it. Back in my year, it was usually beer in there, cooling the beer down.
Right. Not the players. Right. Thank you for that, Tom. So there you go, Nick. We in 1 hour, we've been able to showcase the difference in not only technology, but attitudes, the way people perceived sports science 20, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, there are people to this day who played elite sport, 30, 40 years ago and didn't understand that hydration was important. Sorry, they did, but not water. It was more like what Tom was alluding to. It had to be that brown stuff or that green stuff.
I have
They're both speechless now.
Yeah,
Look.
they are both speechless. So you've caught them, George. Hearing Nick speak, and I don't want to bring it back to Arsenal, but it reminds me a bit of Mikel Arteta in the sense of building a culture and creating that and really having everybody push in one direction and propelling them to a place that maybe other people didn't believe, but everybody internally believed. Is there a coach or that you, Nick, you've taken a lot of inspiration from that has helped you develop your philosophy around your footballing style and even your managerial style?
Yeah, what you said then, words, culture is a word that everyone throws around, like it's an easy word. It's not. It's culture is what you create, and that's an environment, and that for me is a winning environment. And to have a winning environment, you need winning behaviours, and that goes through the staff, through the players, and it's not easy. You have to drive that, and I think the only way to drive that is honesty, and that's one thing that I've always been. Like it or dislike it. I had a manager in Neil Warnock who, if you ask any player, they'll tell you that he's probably the best man manager they ever worked with, and the reason being he was honest. I remember, we played against Leeds United in a quarter-final of an FA Cup, and I played the game. I got man of the match, and the next game we had Arsenal in the semi-final at Old Trafford, and he pulled me the day before the game, and he said, "I know you got man of the match against Leeds in the quarter-final, but for this reason, I'm going to start you on the bench, and I need you to respect it." And as upset as I was, I just got man of the match. We beat Leeds. We're playing Arsenal, the great Arsenal team, Thierry Henry, Patrick Vieira, Bergkamp. I could name you all of them. Obviously, Arsene Wenger was a coach. And, the fact that he was honest with me, I could accept that. And he said, "I need you on the bench and I need you ready to come on." And, straight away, I just respected his honesty. And, to have worked with someone like him, to have worked with people like Mike Phelan, who was assistant to Ferguson for 10 years. Yeah. Brian Robson, Brian Kidd. When I look at the people I've worked with, and the biggest thing I take out of all them people is the humility and the honesty that they live by. And, you're talking some people that have won everything in the game.
Correct.
And I came from a humble background in Leeds where the parents that taught me the right values of being honest and hardworking. And yeah, I think that's what I've built myself on, and that's a culture that I want here, and that's the respect I give to the boys. I treat them like adults. I tell them when they're playing, when they're not playing, when they've done bad, when they've done good, and they respect that. And that's my way. Everyone's got a different way, but my way is to do that. And I honestly feel the boys respect that, and I think that really does help drive a good culture.
Nick Montgomery is our guest, along with Tom Sermanni, two people who not only played the game, but are making their own way in their different elements of their career. Tom has spent a lifetime putting back into the game, and as we've found out today, he's been part of the Canada women's team. We're
not going to hold it against me.
We're not going to hold it against him, as they prepare for the Women's World Cup Down Under. Nick has given us a glimpse of some of the things that he did in his playing day. And, of course, Pokuah Frimpong is now totally in awe of Nick because she's just an Arsenal girl and a half.
Yeah, I'm just, if I see any correlation between Arsenal and anybody else, I'm automatically on the ship. That's what's happening.
But quite seriously, the thing that has shone through, and I'll ask Tom Sermanni this, the thing that shone through even with this discussion with Nick is it's all about the relationship you have with the players, isn't it, Tom?
Yeah, well, not just the players, but I think everybody else. I think it's not that, but it's got to be the genuine relationship. And as Nick said, everybody talks about culture. Everybody talks, all of these things. But it's the actions that really make a difference. And, you can see by listening to Nick that it's the actions that have created that environment that he's created at the Mariners. And that's the key thing.
Everybody we know in the game who loves the game and cares for the game and can be neutral is saying to us their team of choice at the moment is the Central Coast Mariners. That should fill you with a great deal of pleasure, but at the same time you understand it's a results-driven business. You have a fantastic opportunity to not only finish what you've started, but to break new ground and make it a historic season, Nick.
Yeah, it's no secret. This 10 years ago to this year that the club last won the grand final, and I was part of that squad. The club went bankrupt after that year with the new owners coming in, and I think what people forget now is when people talk about that great team we had then. We had some real good experienced players in myself, Patrick Swansway, John Hutchinson, but we also had young players, Matty Ryan, Tom Rodgick, Bernie Abini, Mitch Duke, for example, and you look at the league as it is now, a marquee player back then was Del Piero at 39 on a massive salary. Now you've got visa players that are outside the cap, product players. Teams are spending a lot more money. So, when you actually think about it, it's a lot harder now for a club like us that spend a lot less than we did 10 years ago in the budget now. And the big teams are spending and utilising all these different ways of getting around the cap. And, for me, they should just abolish the cap. Let the team spend what they want, have an open transfer system so that if Melbourne City want to buy one of our young players, for example, that's the way that we can generate money and become sustainable. So I think there's a lot of growth to come in the A-League. But, for us as a club, we're just going to concentrate on doing what we do, and that's just go out and try and win games of football and develop players and send players overseas like we did last year and try and continue to do that, because unfortunately we don't control the decisions that are made in football in this country. But hopefully things can really push on now since the World Cup, and the A-League can keep growing. So I think it's a very good league and it's a great standard, and I think it's in a good place right now, and we just need to keep building on it.
Tom Sermanni, listening to Nick Montgomery there. There's a team in the EPL called Brighton that are spending next to no money, and they keep finding players that the rest of the league wants to pay huge money for. What have you made of some of those comments from Nick? Do you think he's on the money?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it was his win bonus 10 years ago. It sent the club bankrupt, from what I'm hearing. But I'm not sure if that's the case. No, it's 100%. No, he's on the money with that. I think the different clubs have different kind of philosophies. They come from different backgrounds,
yep.
and I think probably the comparison with Brighton that you mentioned and the Mariners is probably quite pertinent. And that's the club that they are. And I think what Nick's done is really enhance that kind of environment of what the club is about and built success on that. So, as I say, it's tough to do that, but fantastic the way that he's done it.
Yeah, it's a credit to everybody involved, and I just want to say to both of you, Tom, thank you for being with us and for staying the journey, and for Nick, as always, whenever we reach out to him, Tom, there is never a no or I can't do it. Unless they're coaching or unless they're in a game mode, the answer is always yes, and we really appreciate it at FNR. And to both of you, thank you very much. We wish you continued success, Nick. Tom, all the very, very best. See you soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks, George.
Good luck. Good luck to both of you.
Tom.
Nick, all the best for the weekend.
Yeah, good luck for the weekend.
Cheers, guys.
Go Arsenal Mariners.
Oh, gee.
That's it.
Thank you, mate. Thank you to both of you. Isn't that great? What did you make of having both of them there? Two different generations, but both players, successful players, hard-working managers. One building a career, the other one's had a fabulously colourful one, and basically has done everything you can. Coached World Cups. Delivered tournaments and competitions. It's a lot. It's wonderful to have that perspective, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that the more we hear from different people's perspective, who have different experiences, I think the better the game of football becomes. Because,
there you go.
Because different opinions allow us to filter out everything, and it's fantastic. But hearing from Nick, I really like hearing from honest, like really honest managers who are just straight to the point and want to see the Grow do so well. And I think that's one of the things that comes across from Nick Montgomery. He seems like a very genuine
100%.
person who understands the position of the Mariners, but says that's not the limit of the Mariners. And I think that's a really impressive thing. And
as a man manager and as a coach, I see the player within, the passionate, fire-driven player he was, still within the that makeup that now allows him to be the man calling the shots. You can see he's riding every tackle with his players.
Certainly.
And if they score, you can see him, yes, and it filters through.
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes it easier for them to believe him. And to speak to Tom as well was great, because to hear from somebody who's been a part of the women's game for so long, even before it was in vogue,
very much so.
And
very much so.
And that I think it's always interesting to see like their perspective on how the game
a trailblazer,
and how the game has changed and evolved, and where the game still needs to go after seeing all the progression. I think it's always lovely to see.
Well, as always, each and every week, the program State of Our Football Nation is brought to you with the support of the Global Institute of Sport. Pokuah Frimpong has been my co-host. George Daniki in this end. We look forward to having you join us next week, once again, on Football Nation Radio.